because coming in as a rookie, I don't know what to expect in the second year, third year. Okay, I get what this thing is. So yes, the responsibility is more because Mike Trout knows if I don't take care of the lowest guy on the totem pole, there won't be no baseball.
But Ben, I'm not arguing about responsibility. What I'm saying is, would any of us have any sympathy or care one way or the other if we were listening to brokers argue it out in a Wall Street company? No, the only reason we care is because we care about baseball, right? And the reality is the lowest paid player in 2021 made $570,000.
Mm-hmm.
The lowest paid player in Major League Baseball, which is probably just some minor leaguer who came up. It was a right-handed pitcher, Kyle Garlick for Minnesota. I don't know if any of us have ever heard of Kyle Garlick, but he made $500,000 last year. And so people who in the public who love baseball and love consuming that sport and have eaten the price increases of trying to go to their team's games and had to pay Major League Baseball, if you're in an out of market, an exorbitant amount of money to consume your team's games, and just really the fan kind of bearing the brunt of all of this. I don't think they give a rip either way.
No, they're not supposed to. I'm not saying they're supposed to give a rip, but Christian, like you looking at it from it's one of those things to where, it's different strokes for different folks. These people are saying, look, man, this is big business we talking about. This is billionaires. Let me say, this is not billionaires versus millionaires. This is billionaires versus some millionaires and a bunch of thousandaires, a lot of thousands, a whole bunch of thousands.
I would say a majority of them are millionaires because, like I said, Kyle Garlick made the least amount of money last year, and he made $570,000.
That's and again, it's semantical. I would say that's pre-tax. I mean, they're not walking around with $1 million in their pocket.
No, but still, if Kyle plays 2 years, he will have earned over $1 million playing Major League Baseball.
Yeah. I mean, but that's like saying if I worked at a company and I made $100,000 for 2 years, I don't have $200K in the bank. I'm gonna be spending this cheese. I know what I can see both sides of what you're saying, Christian. But like I said, understand this. The players tried to keep it simple. They gave the owners a mulligan, and the owners messed this up. Because I think what happens in these situations is you're not dealing with players that just, quote, play baseball and go home. No, they know what they bring to the table. They see how Mike Trout can fill a stadium that he doesn't even play in because of how big of a player he is. I'm helping other teams make revenue. So I do think the owners are very, very greedy in this situation because they locked it out in December. You had that much time to get this done. So
I'm just trying to we'll see what happens. When we get on here and we call the owners greedy.
Well, right? I mean,
it's just I'm not trying to get on here and support owners.
No,
right?
I'm not
trying to get on here and support billionaires, but it's like, and you hear it all over the place. Ben's not the only person saying it.
Yeah.
Is the narrative is the players are fighting ownership greed is what they're fighting. So then what are the players fighting for? What is their motivation?
Well, I mean,
because we use words like greed with the owners, and then we use words like security with the players.
Because the owners are only fighting for 30 people. The players are fighting for current players, future players, and former players. That's a CBA is not just for the current player. You're talking about former players that have played and future players who are coming. So it's 30 versus thousands of people. That's what people.
What are they fighting for those people?
They're fighting for a chance to get to their contract earlier. I know that was one thing that's been in there is they are trying to get them to get to arbitration faster. So a guy like Ronald Acuna, again, who got a big deal from the Braves, they didn't have to do that. He has come up and played really well under the current system. When you go to arbitration, he might get a few more dollars, but he's not going to get the contract that he would probably get as one of the top 10 players.
Getting to arbitration earlier, right? Securing better contracts.
Yeah.
What are they fighting for?
I think they are fighting for that.
Like Ben's talking about future, and for everyone else, no. But for what?
Number one, you trying to make it so that when the next group of players come through, the floor, the ceiling that was set with the current players becomes something that's worth even fighting for the future players. And
no, but that's extremely philanthropic. But my point is, what is all of this fighting for?
Well, this is
fighting for
money.
Well, I mean, but yes,
no, not. It's not necessarily.
Everybody would just show up and play.
Yeah,
right?
Not necessarily, man. I'm telling you, a CBA. I always remember this: when it comes to a collective bargaining agreement, they're only gonna put the stuff out to the media that they think you're interested in. This thing is way more integral than people make it seem. This thing is thick. Like we just looking at the high priority, I guess, like items. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, I just think that sometimes when you talk about these owners, man, or these players, the players don't even know how much they fighting for till they come to the table. And they be like, "Dude, we got to do what? But what?" Like they learn about all this stuff when they come. I see what Christian. I understand exactly what you're saying, but it will be equivalent. I mean, to buying a home and going through that contract. Ask Kevin, man, it's so many papers that you sign, and you like, dude, I just want to get the crib. Yeah, but we got to go through this. It is thick. So I do understand both sides of it, but as a former player, I just understand too. You don't even know how much you fighting for a Christian until you get to the bargaining table.
I think a lot of what I see in it is maybe the players view it this way, but it should be a partnership, and maybe they don't see it that way. Like, hey, we are the product. We are all making money. We just want to make sure that it's not, hey, I mean, because on the other side, you would come back and say, well, what's the alternative to the players? It would be nobody in the league makes more than $100,000 a year. And that's more than enough. Meanwhile, the profits never changed. The revenue didn't change. We're still making billions of dollars. We just said nobody gets more than $1 million because, well, that's enough. You're good. So I think it's on a relative scale here where, again, I think the owners have tried to cry that they don't have enough money. Well, you don't give out $40 million contracts if you are not able to do that. And I think the players are saying, look, we want more players at the bottom getting paid more, which is fine. Again, I don't think there's a problem saying that. Every labor disagreement in the history of the world is about money. Like that, nobody goes on strike because they want the toilets to work better. Like everybody goes on strike to get more money at their job.
I would absolutely disagree with that.
So not one strike has ever happened in the history of the world where they said, as a byproduct, we would also like to get paid better.
I think working conditions have absolutely been reasons why people have gone on strike in the past.
And would part of those working conditions be getting more money?
I think part of those working conditions, and again, we're comparing industry to baseball, but again, I think coal miners would probably disagree with you when it came about working conditions and why they were striking.
Maybe so. But I know most labor agreements ultimately come down to we do like better conditions, and we'd also like a little bit more of the pie that is coming into the company because we are the ones digging the coal out of the side of the mountain at the end of the day. A little different. I get it. It's baseball, but it's a business industry nonetheless. We've got to step aside. We've got more to come here. Kevin Knight, the Falcoholic, will join us when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, not here. Ben Troop in here on this Friday afternoon. Of course, the Combine going on there in Indianapolis this week. The Atlanta Falcons, number 8 overall in the draft, and a lot of things for them to look at. And joining us here on the program from the Falcoholic, Kevin Knight joins us here on 3 and Out. Kevin, welcome. How are you?
Doing good. Happy to be on. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, man, appreciate you coming on, and the Combine going on. And for a team that needs a little bit of everything, it seems like, at least through the drills, looking pretty deep at a lot of key positions that the Falcons could be interested in here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's obviously quarterback is the most controversial opinion based on my Twitter interactions over the past couple of days. But, I mean, everything's on the table for them. I do think Terry Fontenot, the general manager, is serious about his best player available approach. I mean, looking back at the 2021 class, we saw them really focus on future-oriented picks. But, yeah, in terms of positions, I mean, pretty much anything could be on the table.
Kevin, I mean, how much could a guy like Terry Fontenot really be looking at this draft saying, look, dude, I mean, obviously you come in with a certain plan, but it seems like every position is trying to outdo the other position. It has been impressive across the board, regardless of position this year.
Yeah, it's really deep at a lot of positions, and that's a good thing for the Falcons, who also do have an additional second-round pick from the Julio Jones trade. But, I mean, at the top at 8, it's sort of one of those classes where there's like a few blue-chip guys. You know, everyone knows about Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, Kyle Hamilton, and then it's like a lot of really good players. So, I mean, to me, obviously, edge is the biggest need in terms of positional need. But I know there's been a lot of hype recently for a cornerback because of the way the board might fall with guys like Sauce Gardner, Andrew Booth, Derek Stingley possibly being there. I mean, the guy for me that I'd always be hoping for would be Kyle Hamilton, but let's be honest, he's probably not going to be there at 8. So, you know, looking at those other players, you know, Devin Lloyd is someone that's somewhat of a sleeper, and then I'm a big fan of Malik Willis as a future-oriented pick, but it really just depends. I mean, they've been very tight-lipped about their true intentions with that pick, and whether or not they're really considering the quarterbacks in this class is still sort of up in the air.
Yeah, Kevin, when you're talking about Terry Fontenot, we've seen guys in the past for Atlanta obviously not be afraid to move up for offensive pieces and wide receivers. We've seen them do that a number of times. How do you think the Falcons are approaching this? I know you said they've been, kind of tight-lipped about it, but they literally seem like they could just take the best guy available on their board, and it would be somebody that would help them win.
Yeah, I think that's plan A, is to see what falls and then go after it. It's why, you know, despite a lot of fans sort of being against it, I think that they would consider Malik Willis, you know, if he is the best guy that's left there at that point. I don't think they're going to get aggressive in trading up for a quarterback or anything like that, or any position really, because that just doesn't seem like Fontenot's style as opposed to like a Dimitroff. But I think a trade down would be something that Fontenot would really consider as well, because like we were saying, this is a very deep class, particularly at edge, at wide receiver. You know, 2 positions the Falcons really need. So I do think they'll strongly consider trading down if a quarterback is not the pick at 8. And they, you know, the top guys like Hamilton's not there, Thibodeau, Hutchinson, those sorts of guys still aren't there. So I think obviously it takes 2 to tango with any sort of trade down, but I think that'll be a top priority too, because this roster, it just needs so much help. So getting a couple extra day 2 picks if you can would go a long way.
How much did Calvin Ridley's absence last year really kind of affect the way Terry Fontenot and obviously the Falcons going to this draft, knowing that while Kyle Pitts was incredible last year, only 1 touchdown in the regular season and essentially became the number 1 receiver?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough with Kyle Pitts. Obviously, you see the overall production, and it's staggering in terms of a rookie tight end season. You know, with the red zone, the whole Falcons offense was pretty poor in the red zone, and you could trace that back to a lot of things. A new scheme for Matt Ryan was part of it. He traditionally tends to be a little bit lackluster in his first year of a new scheme. This was the same way under Kyle Shanahan, same way under Steve Sarkisian. But there also just weren't any complementary players after Calvin Ridley stepped away. So it was really just Kyle Pitts as the primary guy. I mean, we would see him sometimes getting double or even triple teamed in the red zone. And it was sort of up to other guys like Russell Gage, who did end up coming on strong towards the end of the season, having a very good year overall. But other than that, I mean, it was a barren cupboard in terms of the weapons. And then the offensive line was obviously a huge issue. And when you get down into the red area and you don't really have a dynamic receiving threat and your running game is poor outside of Cordarrelle Patterson, there wasn't a lot to help Pitts get freed up. I do suspect that getting him more involved in the red zone is obviously a big part of their plans going forward. And I think improving the offensive line, run game, and adding some weapons, just if you could do those couple of small things, you could definitely help Pitts unlock that part of his game a little bit more.
Kevin Knight, the Falcoholic, joining us here on 3 and Out. And Kevin, you've mentioned quarterback a couple of times, kind of jokingly, around this team. I know it's a topic of hot conversation with Matt Ryan, even Terry Fontenot and company. You're like, yeah, we love Matt. He's our guy. But if we see a guy, where do you think the Falcons are here with quarterback? Because it seems like if you keep Matt Ryan, which they obviously have for this year, the goal is to try to win right now. And you're in a division minus Tom Brady that appears to be open. Would you wait? And I say maybe it's not waste. Maybe that's a bad term. But would you use a first-round pick on a quarterback when you could take some other guys that could help you win right now, which if you're keeping Matt Ryan should be the goal, right?
Yeah, it's been really sort of interesting to see the front office really try to straddle this line and refuse to sort of commit one way or the other to, like, we are actually going all in with Matt Ryan or we're building for the future. I mean, if you look at the draft last year and how they constructed the team, it certainly seemed to suggest that a future-focused strategy was the goal. But again, they had no cap space last year, and I think, the first year of a new regime, they're just sort of, it's an evaluation year. So again, even looking at last year, it's hard to predict. But I mean, I think it depends on their board. I think if I'm a big fan of Malik Willis, I mean, I've been a fan of him for a long time. So his strong play at the Senior Bowl in particular made me confident enough to be like, I think going to Atlanta would be the perfect situation for him. Arthur Smith's offense would work great for his skill set. They don't have to force him onto the field early. They can give him a year, maybe even 2 if he absolutely needed it. But I don't know if they like Willis like that. I'm sure I will never find out until we get to the draft to see if they actually take him at 8 or not. I know they do like Desmond Ridder. He was one of the first guys they talked to at the Senior Bowl. I know Arthur Smith spent a long time talking to Cincinnati's head coach on the sideline in Mobile. And, I think there's a desire there as well. Ridder has drawn comparisons to Tannehill coming out. So, you would think that makes a lot of sense in terms of that skill set. I start to think that from a predictive standpoint, they're probably hoping someone falls to 43, which is their second round pick. And Ridder is probably the one they want. I just find it hard to believe that he'll be there considering teams like the Steelers are allegedly interested in him. But, I think they're probably hoping to address it with a second round pick, but, I don't think it's off the table for them to go after someone like Willis at 8. It's just, we just don't know.
I mean, Kevin, I guess like dream scenario, just say, I do think Sauce Gardner is going to be there at 8. I do think Derek Stingley Jr. is going to be there at 8. I hope that Kayvon Thibodeau is there at 8. If all 3 of those guys are still sitting there at 8, I mean, who do you think Terry Fontenot goes with?
I think it's Thibodeau at that point. I think the edge need is bigger because they have Terrell. Terrell is their cornerback 1. I think they can cobble it together in the secondary. I mean, I certainly would consider Sauce as well. I don't think they'll have him on their board above Thibodeau. And the one I'd be sort of dreaming for would be Kyle Hamilton. But again, who knows? As a safety, who pulls the trigger? And if no one pulls the trigger on Kyle Hamilton before 8, he's going at 8 because I think Terry Fontenot is very serious about best player available. He will not care that Hamilton's a safety, and he will get him.
Kevin Knight, the Falcoholic, our guest here on 3 and Out. Kevin, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
And again, a lot of intrigue, as he said there, around that Atlanta Falcons pick there at number 8. We'll come back. Anthony Trace, Pro Football Focus, will join us. Combine going on. Who stood out at the Combine? Who's making themselves some money there at the Combine as well? And just how deep are some of these spots like the offensive tackles, which we could see go really early in this draft. Anthony Trace will join us next here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along here, 3 and Out on this Friday afternoon. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, glad you're making us a part of your day. The Combine going on in Indianapolis, and joining us here on the program from PFF, Anthony Trace joins us here on 3 and Out. Anthony, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Fantastic. What has stood out, if anything? I know we had a lot of fast receiver times. What's kind of been the story early there at the Combine?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot going on, and I mean, it's really only starting, right? I mean, we still have these 3 more days of drills. Really looking forward to those. But, after, the first day, definitely, of course, the receivers, the fast 40 times. I mean, a lot of those guys were flying. I think some guys really made themselves some money. Christian Watson from North Dakota State is one in particular. I think Sky Moore, he did some good things. 3-cone and pro agility weren't, probably up to what expectations were. But he still has the tape there, and he ran a quality 40. And also Chris Olave. I mean, he kind of put himself there in that first round conversation, kind of solidified himself as a first round pick. And when some people thought he was kind of fringe before that, and, I'm happy for him for that because I always thought he was a top 20 guy. So I think he has a chance to go in that range now. And I think the biggest thing, though, just what I've been hearing is, kind of involving the quarterbacks. Malik Willis, I thought he would be the first quarterback off the board coming in. I wasn't sure if he was going to be a top 10 pick, but after just, talking to some people over the last couple of days, I'm starting to get the feeling that, he could go a lot quicker than, most people think, right? And I wouldn't even rule him out as, number 2 overall. I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but I do think that Malik Willis, I will go in the top 10, and I think we'll see him off the board really, really, really.
Anthony, as impressive as these quarterbacks have been, if just say a guy like Malik Willis does go number 2, or maybe as high as number 6 to the Carolina Panthers, do you think because of how love they get with these quarterbacks, because the guy goes a lot earlier than they thought, do you see like a bunch of quarterbacks end up going in the first round? Because at the end of the day, I mean, you can't go wrong if you end up with a big time QB coming out.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I could see both cases, why we could see a run, why we wouldn't. I always thought that we would see a run, but, over the last couple of days, I'm just not sure we will. And I think it's just a lot of hesitancy and question marks, with everybody. Even Malik Willis has his own question marks, but he just has really fantastic tools, right? I mean, they're in elite territory, and that's why he's probably going to go in the top 10. But after that, the next 4 all have some question marks there. But I do think Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder really helped themselves to possibly put themselves in first-round conversation. I think they probably should be first-round picks. Desmond Ridder, in my opinion, is the top quarterback prospect in this class. And he's been interviewing really well. Of course, had an exceptional combine on the field, put some really good times there, showed he's a dual threat. And you look at Sam Howell, he's interviewed really well too. And teams have been impressed with him too. So I think those 3 quarterbacks, Malik Willis, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder, I think they really helped themselves this week. Kenny Pickett, on the other hand, I don't think he did as much. I think the hand size thing in almost every situation, I would say up until this point, in every situation, it was widely overblown. But in this case, I mean, this is a pretty significant issue, I would say. I mean, NFL ball is bigger. He's looking at his hands, 8.5 inches, about half an inch less than any other quarterback in the NFL right now. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a tough situation for him, playing outdoors at times. We've seen that throughout Pitt. And, I think also, too, look at the way his game's kind of been, played at Pitt. I think it's going to be tough for him to translate to the next level. And I do think that he's been kind of, continuously falling over the last couple of months. And Matt Corral, too, he did come in a little bit bigger than expected, but he still is a little bit smaller. And teams are going to be afraid, of that offense that he was in at Ole Miss. I mean, how long it's going to take him to kind of adjust to an NFL offense. So I think right now I would say 3 quarterbacks will go in round 1, maybe 4. But whereas before, I came here, I thought we'd see at least 5. Those get 5 guys off the board in the first 32.
Anthony Trace, PFF, joining us here on 3 and Out. And you talk about the guys at the top of the draft, those offensive tackles. Obviously, it would appear Jacksonville probably going to go somewhere along that offensive line to help protect Trevor Lawrence. How deep are those guys? Obviously, they look very impressive talking to folks and standing up there. But Neil, Ikwamu, how do you kind of rate those guys out, and how deep are the prospects there along that offensive line?
Yeah, really deep. I mean, there's a lot of quality guys there, and definitely Jacksonville is eyeing an offensive tackle there. Ike Ekwonu is getting some hype recently. I mean, he's shifted in the betting market significantly from 9-1 down to 4-1. to be the first overall pick. And, I've heard that, he's very much in the conversation. They like, Ike Ekwonu just as much as they like Evan Neal, and it's going to be a tough decision for him. So, of course, there's a possibility that we could see Ekwonu as the first guy off the board. I think, too, you speak about the depth, and you look at some of the guys that are still going to be there, and, towards the end of round one. I mean, Bernhard Raimann is one in particular from Central Michigan. I think he's an exceptional talent, one that's really not talked about enough. I think he should probably go, 10 picks sooner than what he will at the end of that first round. So, this tackle class has loaded with depth. And, at the top there, it gets really interesting because, I think teams are going to have a tough decision to make. Well, I mean, mainly the Jacksonville Jaguars with Evan Neal, with Ike Ekwonu, and even Charles Cross from Mississippi State. I mean, who I think was the most improved tackle this past season. I mean, his movement skills are exceptional. And so it's going to be interesting to see where everybody kind of shakes out. But, I do think there is a good chance that we do see 3 tackles off the board within the first 6 picks. Carolina definitely wants a tackle. They really want to bolster that offensive line, and understandably so. I mean, it was really, poor last year. So I'm expecting them to go tackle, as I am with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And, I think we could see another one fall in there, possibly to the Giants as well. So, it's going to be interesting to see where everything kind of shakes out.
Anthony, I mean, as you mentioned, it's already been incredibly impressive when you think about the wide receivers, think about the tight ends. I mean, you think about the quarterbacks. But what are you looking forward to going into the weekend?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing these DBs test. I think they're going to put up some incredible numbers. I think last night there I was out to dinner and we were watching the combine on the phone, and then all of a sudden these 45s, they just keep coming in, and we were freaking out. And we're like, this is incredible. And of course, some of them got adjusted, but I do think we're going to see that and then some with the DBs. One player in particular that I'm looking at is Daxton Hill. He played slot for Michigan this past year, was exceptional in that, produced very well, has been a top 10 graded player in the slot over the last couple of years. And, looking at what he did in high school at the opening event, I mean, he clocked a 4.3 flat 40 and I think it was a 43.6 inch vertical. He was in high school. I think he's going to test exceptionally well. Kalen Barnes, the cornerback from Baylor, I think he's going to run an ultra fast 40, maybe the fastest 40 of the weekend. And then there's a ton of others there that I'm excited to see. So I'm really looking forward to the DBs. I'm really looking forward to every single group. There's no doubt about that. And, even the very deep edge group, I think, mainly Jermaine Johnson. I know there's been question marks about his ceiling from an athleticism perspective, maybe not up to the level of some in this class, but I still think he's going to test well. So I'm really excited for every single day, but the DBs, that's the group I circled when I was coming in.
Anthony Traish, PFF, our guest here on 3 and Out, as the combine, as he said, rolls right on into the weekend. Anthony, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anthony Traish joining us here. Has been the combine going on, and it's kind of different from a lot of other events where people kind of view the NFL as like you gear up. This thing goes right in through the weekend and around. I think the DBs and the secondary folks are out there on Monday even doing their workouts. So this is one of those things where people usually it's like the NFL likes to have the big to do on like a Friday, maybe a Saturday afternoon. This thing's going on all week and into the weekend and the start of next week.
Yeah, Kevin. I mean, and it's only getting crazier, right? Like, I mean, remember what was it? Well, a week removed that all the agents were saying they was going to boycott and none of the players was going to play. I mean, think about it. I mean, certain guys have said, Derek Singler Jr. said, I'm going to boycott. I'm not going to do it. But we forget. Look, when one man won't do, another man when you. It's kind of what you said about MLB. Oh, you don't want to take that spotlight? Well, I'm going to jump in there and go ahead and get my shine because we're going to worry about the guys that did do it. And when you think about it, it gives a guy who's not a big name but got invited a chance to go out there and really show what he can do. But, Kevin, it has been impressive. I mean, you're talking about Desmond Ridder, ran a 4.4. You talk about Chris Olave for Ohio State, ran a 4.26. I think, and I'm not going to butcher his name. One of the most impressive, the big tight end out of Maryland, man, ran a 4.52. And when he got done, he went like this. He's like, "Are they still sleeping on me?" I mean, it's a chance for you to go out there and really show off what you can do. Because certain guys, Kevin, unfortunately, certain guys aren't good athletes, but they're great football players. Certain guys are great athletes, aren't good football players. Certain guys are both, and you want to be able to show it. But so far, so good, man. Malik Willis, as he mentioned, throwing the rock. I mean, I'm sorry, Kenny Pickett, that your hands ain't big enough. I think that kind of stuff is ridiculous. He's been able to do all these. I think that kind of stuff is crazy.
I was going to say, I was going to bring it up to you later in the show, but go ahead now since you brought it up. I mean, and again, maybe there is something to be said like, hey, it's harder to grip the football, whatever, and that leads to this, that, what have you. But when you hear something like that, and I know you have said, look, I've been the guy that people have said kind of weird stuff about. It's like, oh, the shoulders don't look like this, or why doesn't your elbow bend this way? And so like when you hear like oh, he's got 8.5-inch hands, and that's like a half-inch shorter than anybody else in the league, and all that. What goes through your mind when you hear like that level of eval going on? Are we overdoing it, or does that have some real kind of metric to it?
If I'm a team that wants him, I want to hear it all day. I want y'all to just get as far away from the dude as possible because I want to get him. And if you start talking about evaluations, I just think some of it is ridiculous. I mean, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Cam Newton, these dudes ain't ready. And what is going on since they got Kevin? You know, just like I know, all you need is one. It's 32 opportunities. I need one of them to take a chance on me and see what happens. And guess what? I'm pretty sure that since college is over, he has been using an NFL football. No more stripes on each end of it, right? And it looks like he was throwing the ball pretty well. It's almost like you're trying to, I told you, Kevin, you're trying to find every reason to say he's not that guy. Look at what he did for Pitt last year. So you telling me because the ball get a little bigger? Well, the players are getting bigger. The players are getting faster. The players are getting stronger. He's still one of the guys that got invited to the combine. Somebody's going to get him, and his little hands is going to be throwing a lot of touchdowns, and then what they going to say then?
I understand. It's just weird to hear it when you start getting that into the weeds on some of the details on these guys, what teams will throw up as a potential red flag. We got more to come here on 3 and Out coming up next hour. Obviously, continue to look at the combine. We'll also hear from Connor Riley of Dog Nation. George is well represented there. Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com will join us in the final hour. Look at some SEC spring storylines, I should say, as well. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.
You believe what he just said? You believe that? Why? So you telling me a guy named Charleston White who was business sensationalized everything he said? You know Charleston White. I spoke to him, I'm in the media. But think about this. So you telling me because of what a man has on? You telling me because you think George Floyd? No, he still got like No. It shouldn't matter. You should be able to wear what you want. But if a man is if I come in, and say, yep, all that, guess what? Really? If I'm a rich white boy and I come in pants sag, you think you're gonna do me like that? You know it's different. No, hold on. So if you know it's different, why are you celebrating the difference? You are the difference. I only do but so much though. You listen to what I'm saying. You are celebrating something of a man that could have been you. George could have been anybody's name. They don't know what George Floyd has done. This man stuck his neck. I mean, I got put his neck. But all I'm saying is, I live in Brunswick, Georgia, where Mark Albert got killed for jogging. Yeah. They deemed him unfit. How you feel about the Rittenhouse? How you feel about that? I feel as though wax is get you out of jail. Because black people cry on saying. We can deal across. No. You miss what I'm saying. You got to know how to fight, not just to fight. You got to know what you're fighting for. You fight for people that dress like this, they ain't dress like this, they ain't dress like that. Because if we all in one room, and that's the thing about this. If your daddy is the sheriff in Swansboro, they gonna treat you different because of who your daddy is. But they gonna treat you different because of melanin. Black is the only color that's stigmatized in the world. So all I'm saying is, my mama named me Benjamin because you don't know Benjamin's white or black till I show up to the interview. But if my name is Tyrone, they're like, I don't know. All I'm saying is, listen, think what you want. I ain't mad at Charleston White. I ain't mad at that. I mean, you feel how you want to feel. But wrong is wrong. That man got murdered on national TV. Ahmaud Arbery got hunted down by 3 dudes. 2 of them had shotguns.
But I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
So what was lingering in my mind is like how our race defends everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
We defend white people,
Mm-hmm.
we defend Asians,
Mm-hmm.
we defend Hispanic,
Mm-hmm.
we defend everybody else. But when we in a difficult predicament, don't nobody defend.
That's not true. Just because, listen.
But on a different magnitude.
Just because
what has changed?
Just because you don't see them don't mean they ain't doing it.
Yeah, but what has changed for us?
You gotta stop. Stop celebrating celebrities. Start celebrating people who ain't famous is doing it. Because people that ain't famous is doing it. Ain't famous. You want to know how they ain't famous? What's the name of the dude that's over y'all director? What's his name? The dude that's over y'all thing. What's his name? Andre what? A superhero. He's doing it every day.
Welcome back to 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, glad to have you along on this Friday. We'll take 3 coming up right around the corner. Connor Riley of Dog Nation will join us next hour as well, and we'll talk about Georgia there at the Combine. But Ben, coming out today, we did see the MLB players. I think MLB is going to do it too, but the Players Association set up a $1 million fund for MLB and stadium workers who will be affected by the lockout. Obviously, if there's no MLB, there's nobody that needs to come to the stadium and do some of those things. So Players Association setting up a $1 million fund to support those folks. So a good deed there. I know MLB is doing something as well. I did see one person say, but you're MLB. Aren't you supposed to be helping pay those folks by, having games anyway? But anyways, that's neither here nor there. But again, good to see that folks, because that was one thing saying, look, while the players and owners squabble it out, there's a lot of people that are going to be feeling the residuals of this thing.
Yeah, I don't celebrate that. I don't usually give PAs in any, whether that's MLB PA, NFL PA, NBA PA. But Kevin, I mean, sometimes you just get it right? Sometimes you understand that, look, I mean, the magnitude of this thing is only growing. And $1 million, that's a lot of money. I don't know how far that's gonna stretch. When you talk about how many people you could potentially be, but I give the PA a lot of credit, man. I think the MLB PA is trying to really reshape their reputation, Kevin, because let's face it, up until now, they've been a pushover. I mean, just like most PAs. I mean, they don't have a lot of stripes on the wall, but I give them a lot of credit trying to do the right thing. Hopefully that million becomes 2 and 3, because you get a bunch of entities putting monies in the pot. That pot could grow, because I think that million is going to go real quick. But I do give credit when credit is due, so I do appreciate what they're doing.
I appreciate what they're doing, Ben. I would actually say I hope that million doesn't need to go to 2 or 3, and they can just come to a deal and people can go back to work, right? I mean, that's the at the end of the day, that's what we're all hoping for. But yeah, saw that and wanted to mention that before we had to step aside here at the top of the hour. We'll come back. We'll take 3. Big weekend in college basketball. We'll look at the NFL Combine this weekend. Connor Riley, Dog Nation, set to join us coming up in hour number 2 as well. Hit us up on Twitter. Love to hear from you at Pigskin Radio. We're streaming live as well at ESPNCoastal.com. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Friday. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, glad you're making us a part of your day. So much to get to here in this second hour. We'll hear from Connor Riley of Dog Nation in just a little bit. We'll also get the latest from the Combine coming up in this hour as they just gotten underway the last couple of days, and it will go all the way back around through Monday. So a lot to get to there this hour as well. But what we like to do every day at this time, we like to take three. We'll do that now here on 3 and Out as we bring in Ben Troop. Ben, we take three. Take one, Coach K. His final home game for Duke on Saturday against North Carolina. The tickets I read going for like $6,000 to get in to watch Duke, North Carolina, and Coach K's final game there at Cameron Indoor. Is he the greatest college basketball coach?
Yes, Kevin, and obviously, I mean, you got guys, Coach Thompson, Bobby Knight. I mean, you got some great coaches. I'm not saying, but I just think, Kevin, when you talk about consistency, right? Check. When you talk about championships, check. But look at how much he's meant to college basketball. Number one, Duke is the New York Yankees of college, but you can't either hate them or you cannot stand them. But he's the standard. Right? Coach K has been the standard at a place like Duke, to where, obviously they got UNC right down Tobacco Road. But I just think, like, Kevin, think about it. He's the type of guy to where most people have never seen him coach, but they know who he is. Most people have never, really talked to him or interviewed him, know where he coaches. And I think to be able to transcend the sport, because he's transcended it. I mean, doesn't he got a freaking arena or something on campus named after him? I mean, they got stuff named after him, and he's actively a coach. And he's been there so long, Kevin, it's going to be hard to imagine college basketball without him, right? Even though this is last year. So I would say he's the best. And that's taking nothing away from guys that has done it at a consistent level. But I don't know if one man has meant more to not just his university, but to the game he coached than a Coach K.
Yeah, I will put Mike Krzyzewski at 2. I'll put John Wooden at 1.
Yeah, I'm about to say John Wooden's up there. He is.
Yeah, so I would make John Wooden 1. Again, you won 88 games in a row. That's insane. If Gonzaga, everybody thought that was awesome last year. Like, Gonzaga hadn't lost; they lost the national championship.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, when you got Kareem.
Yeah, they went twice that and then some in that winning streak. Back in the day, yeah, you had Bill Walton in there too. It's like, yeah, you had a whole bunch of guys that were helping do it. But I would put John Wooden 1 and Mike Krzyzewski, as you said. You either love him or you can't stand him. There, he is number 2, and what he has meant to Duke basketball and college basketball, I think, is immeasurable. Again, even if you don't like him or you do, you know who he is. You know what he's meant to the game of basketball. And Ben, they always say you don't want to be the guy who follows the guy.
Oh yeah.
And I know that may not be too much fun there in Duke next year, but look, I think it's going to be Kyle Singler who's going to take. I'm trying to think who they named to take over there for Coach K. Those are some enormous shoes to fill, taking over that job. You don't know if you want to be the guy following the guy. You want to be the next guy to come after that. To take over for Coach K. All right, moving along, take 2. You must take a quarterback in this draft, Ben, to be your starter for the next decade. So you're taking them, whether they're good or bad, they're going to be your quarterback for the next decade. That's what you're drafted on. Who are you taking?
I'm taking Malik Willis. I think, Kevin, when you think about a guy like Malik Willis, right, think about this. Okay, he didn't go to a big-time school. He went to Liberty, right? He boosted the profile of the school that he went to with a coach that had a lot of controversy behind his name, and Hugh Freeze. All he did is went out there and got it done year in and year out. And Kevin, I'm sorry, but I want the dude who you're making up stuff about. I mean, the young man interviews well. He said, "Listen, man, I'm doing this for an audience of one. I don't worry about what people say about me. I just go out there and get it done." And I'm looking at a track record of players who had that controversy and how their careers ended up. I mean, Cam Newton, regardless of how you feel about him, had a pretty good career. 10 years when he was with the Panthers. I mean, you think Lamar Jackson is still being written. I mean, the old Russell Wilson still look good. Kyler Murray, if he could just stop tripping, he's looking good. Old Eli Manning look. So I do think that, Kevin, sometimes, I do think it's more smoke and mirrors. I think Malik Willis is built for it. But if I had a 1B, I think it's Desmond Ridder. because Cincinnati, right? No one thought they was going to make it to the college football playoff. I mean, they just went out there and went undefeated. Desmond Ridder has everything to do with it, take nothing away from his teammates, Kobe Bryant and Sauce Walker, and Sauce Gardner and those guys. But Mekhi Sanders and those guys. So, Malik, I just think that for me, Kevin, give me Malik Willis, because a guy that said I didn't have to go to the Alabamas, to the Ohio States, to the Georgias, and so on, and I'm still one of the top quarterbacks, which proves if you are good enough, they will find you. Give me Malik Willis for the next 10 years.
And again, this is a quarterback class that, again, maybe not as deep as some we've seen in years past. That's why I asked the question, because I know a lot of people like Malik Willis, but a lot of people would say Desmond Ridder might be the better kind of athletic quarterback out there that might be able to do a few more things at the quarterback position. But I think it's shaping up to be Malik Willis would be the guy you would take, and that's to take nothing away from Kenny Pickett, take nothing away from Matt Corral, take nothing away from some of these guys. It just appears that the guy that has the most tools that you feel the best about gambling on, and as you've said a number of times, Ben, you take a quarterback in the draft, it's a gamble now, because they can look great in college, and you just don't know when you get to the National Football League. But I think, I would be right there with you and Malik Willis. All right, moving along. Take 3 ahead of March Madness, and we'll have major conference tournaments starting next week in college basketball. Which college basketball conference do you think is the best or the deepest heading into March?
Whew. Wow. I think the best conference this year might be the SEC. They might be a little bit better, but Kevin, the deepest is always the ACC, because they beat up on each other so bad throughout the course of the year, right? Like, yes, I know Jabari Smith, guard for Auburn, is potentially going to be the number 1 overall pick this year. Bruce Pearl is doing an incredible job, but come on, Kevin, let's call it what it is. The hardest basketball conference in America is the ACC. It just is. I mean, you got Duke, you got Virginia, you got North Carolina.
I don't think this year it is, though. Yeah,
but this is the thing too, right? You say the SEC is the deepest. Rightfully so. Okay. How deep are they gonna go? Excuse me. I'm sitting there having a freaking a bunch of shit. Hold on for a second. Hold on.
All right. Now, I will say, Ben, that I look at it. I think you could make a case for a number of conferences. The SEC is an intriguing one. You've got Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee in the top 15. I think Arkansas is right there in the top 15. You could make a case for them. I think the ACC is a little down. I think the Pac-12 is interesting. I think the Big 12 is interesting from some of the teams that they have out there. Right now, I think the Big 10 could be interesting with what they have. But I will say right now, the deepest might be the Pac-12. To me, they've got a little bit more. They don't have maybe all the best teams, although Arizona's up there at number 2. But they are deep. USC, UCLA, I think you can see a number of those teams deep into the Sweet 16 where you look around and say, man, maybe the Pac-12 has half the teams or half the teams in the Elite 8, or 4 or 5 teams in the Sweet 16, maybe more than any other power conference. So I'm going to go and say the Pac-12 best, deepest conference right now. But I think the SEC has been trying to make a case for most of the season. But ACC, I would say normally this year, I think the ACC kind of down. They just don't have as many really good teams as they normally do. I think they only have a couple of teams in the top 25. And I think maybe even only 4 in the total count in the top 25 and others receiving votes. So you're talking about a conference, the ACC, that prides itself on being an 8 or 9 bid league. And I don't think they've got those teams this year that just make you go, whoa. So I'm not going to play on the ACC. I'm going to say the Pac-12 deepest heading into the tournament.
I mean, it might be, Kevin. I mean, you might be right, but I just think that the gauntlet of the ACC, right? Isn't Georgia Tech, wasn't they regular season ACC champions last year? And I think, or a tournament champion or something like that. I just think that sometimes, Kevin, we just expect the ACC to be loaded. And when it's not, they're not as good. No, dude, like every team has ebbs and flows. Is Kentucky good this year? Yes. Is Auburn good this year? Yes. Is Tennessee good this year? Yes. But guess what? Are those teams going to be around when it matters? Probably not.
I mean, I don't think that's what, if you're the SEC, you hope it's somebody, I mean, you'd hope maybe Kentucky, but can Auburn be a team that shows up there at the Final Four? They've been one of the top teams in the country. And I do think, Ben, what you just said is an interesting kind of detractor to the SEC in basketball. Is like, we've seen runs before outside of teams not named Kentucky. I mean, Florida had their little run and they've fallen back.
They have not been heard from since.
Yeah. And so I think you look at it and say Kentucky makes sense, but who, when you see an Alabama or when you see an Auburn, when you see a team like a Tennessee or an Arkansas, who's there that's going to make that Elite Eight Final Four run? I don't know. I don't know. It's like a believe it when you see it kind of thing, I guess, with some of those teams moving into the NCAA tournament. That's Take 3. We do it each and every day at this time. So much to get to this hour. Look at the NFL Combine this weekend. Also, Connor Riley, Dog Nation, will join us. We'll look at the Georgia players specifically at the Combine. And, Ben, we talked about it from the jump. You talk about Jordan Davis saying he played most of last year at 360 and going to move, and he was still moving around pretty good and going to move down to 330 pounds in the National Football League. That is a scary proposition. We'll get to that a little bit later this hour as well. This is 3 and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, glad you are with us here on this Friday. We'll chat with Connor Riley, Dog Nation, coming up here in just a little bit. 14 Georgia Bulldogs there at the Combine, and he will join us next segment. But, Ben, you get to the draft, and we talked about it earlier, where you just get overanalyzed on everything. What do you think about when you hear guys say, oh, Kenny Pickett, 8.5-inch hands? I mean, obviously, if your team go, oh, I mean, have we seen guys with big hands that can't throw the football? I'm sure we have. I mean, when you see stuff like that, Baker Mayfield's, was it him or Johnny Manziel's shoulders were too square? I mean, what were some of the stuff? I mean, do you hear that stuff when you're there? I mean, when you're standing up there and they start measuring your hands and you start doing wingspan, do you start hearing people going, man, they start hearing the whispers? Do you have guys saying, man, they thought your hands or your vertical jump would be a little bit more than it was? Do you hear that stuff while you're there?
You do. And unfortunately, Kevin, I mean, it affects you. The thing about the combine is this is where you nitpick every single thing. And let's just call it what it really is. This is the age of social media to where everything comes out now. You know, the world of retweets and, you know, commenting on every single thing and I quote tweeting and all this, but it just comes with it. It's for the next 4 days. Right now, it's in the public eye, Kevin, because right now the combine is going on. After the combine, it might come up during some pre-draft process. I mean, some pre-draft conversation, maybe with with Mache or maybe I just think that Mel Kiper. But if you are Kenny Pickett, if you are a Malik Willis, if you are a Desmond Ridder, if you are a player that's being scrutinized more than you should, welcome to the NFL. It's almost like they're preparing you for what you're going to deal with at certain positions because, depending on what team you go to, depending on how profile it is, depending on what type of market you go to, you're going to have to deal with that. And I think that's why I always tell people, Eli Manning, to me, what made him who he was not that he won 2 Super Bowls. He had to deal with that New York media. He was talked about every day. So right, wrong, and different, Kevin, it just comes with it. I think most players, you want to know what they built like, but we talking about genetics, right? I mean, we go back to the smidgen under 6'5", Josh Allen. How did that turn out coming out of Wyoming? So I think it's much to do with nothing, Kevin, because I think the team that's in love with you, they hope that nobody else even asks for your number. Like, please don't even court him. Don't try to date him. Don't try to do anything, because I always think every year with the combine, I be looking for the most ridiculous thing. What type of animal would you be? What type of what's your favorite food? If it's late night snack, what do you want? Are you getting fruit? Are you getting popcorn? I said, I'm getting what's in my refrigerator. That's what I'm getting. I think that looking back on it, it is ridiculous, but you have to deal with this stuff. Like, I mean, if your hands are 9.5 inches, they say, stretch them out a little bit more. Look, man, I can catch the ball. I can throw the football. I can block. I can run. And I just think that, people think that, hey, man, how ridiculous can the combine be? Oh, yeah, listen, this is only the stuff that gets out. You notice the only thing that comes out are from the high-profile players. Could you imagine what a guy who might not even get drafted is being asked? Think about him, a guy that didn't go to a P5, that we don't really know who he is. If they doing Kenny Pickett like this, the last quarterback that got an invite, oh, my God, they probably asked him what they said, listen, man, you got to – pink shirt, yellow shirt, green shirt, go. Like what are we talking about? But Kevin, that's what it is. I mean, right now, right? Remember when the draft was 2 days? Now it's 3 days. It's gonna end up being each day is gonna have its own day. I mean, you're gonna have 7 days worth of draft coverage, and we're gonna tune in for every day. But hey, man, welcome to the combine. Welcome to the freak show. To where, hey, man, it's a meat market. You got guys walking around in boxer briefs saying, I think he got too much hair on his chest. It's crazy. But, Kevin, just like I know, if you're going to invest in something that could potentially be your face for the next 10 years, I want to know every single thing about you.
I mean, that's fair enough. I just when you see stuff like that, it's like, okay, so Kenny Pickett's hands aren't as big as you think. Like, what's he going to do about that? That's one of those things. It's like, hey, I'm
gonna get hand extension surgery. Yeah.
I can fix that, but my hands are not big enough. Like, there's nothing I can do about some of that stuff. I did see you were tweeting about the guys running last night at wide receiver spot. I mean, you had 8 guys?
Yes.
Sub 4.4. That is blazing. And again, it's straight line. It's no pads, but still, You have 8 guys that are picking them up and setting them down, sub 4.4 guys that at a premium spot like wide receiver where everybody is hunting speed out there.
George Pickens to me is probably the most impressive, being a guy that missed the entire year, for the Georgia Bulldogs to come out there, 200 pounds, running a 4.40 40. That's impressive. I mean, that is, because he hasn't played football in a while. He's full go for the combine. He was going to be a full participant, because he's not in the position to be saying, hey man, I'm waiting to my pro day, because they're going to be thinking that maybe he has more of a lingering injury. But all of them were, it's a bunch of guys that were impressive. And let me say y'all this. I know these receivers got y'all thinking, oh man, anybody can run a 4.3. No. Bunch of receivers. About 8, 9 of them ran 4.3, 4.4, some 4.2s. Chris Olave, young man, you should have just ran on out. 4.26, just keep running. Just don't stop. Just run. Go back. Go change clothes. Go shower. Go back to the. But I'm happy for all of them, Kevin. I think that it's showing that, hey man, the most elite athletes on the field, they play on the outside. Cornerbacks, like you notice that the receivers go first to show those DBs what they're gonna be dealing with. And Prime is coming. They're gonna call Jackson State, hey Prime, you think you can come up here, man? I'm here. So the DB is gonna be last, right? Save the best for last. Michael Irvin out there with an extra medium shirt on, tucked in, because we got to show he been lifting. But hey man, Kevin, some of these guys are impressive. Like some of the tight ends, Isaiah Likely looked really, really impressive out of Coastal Carolina catching the football. These guys came to compete, and fortunately, if you're on the roster now and you got millions next to your name, and you got a rookie that's 21 that's putting up those type of numbers, don't buy that new house. I want to rent it. Don't buy a check, because you might have to be changing. You might be changing our locations here soon.
Yeah, and again, it is interesting, as you said, where some numbers just pop out at the combine, where he's like, hey, 4.2, as you said, you almost don't need to do anything else at that point. If you got the college tape, you're obviously good enough to come to the combine. You drop a 4.2, as you said, let me just go talk to some teams and I'll be on my way at the end of the day. And I think we've seen some of that with the bench press, where it's like, hey, at some point you're just showing off, right? You see those guys. Was it Vita Ray? Sitting there, it's like, I'll just keep going. You want me to keep going? Like, am I good? So yeah. You 5 more, 4, like I'm good. So, but they just stand out and make you go, wow. But man, you look at the ultimate evaluation, and I know we used to get on to Al Davis. He was in love with speed and things of that nature. To me, the speed complements the player. We've seen Chris Olave at Ohio State do what he can do. I'm interested to see how some of these other guys who maybe we haven't seen as much tape on, who put up some big time 40s, what they can do when obviously guys are trying to jam you at the line, guys are trying to disrupt your route. Can you still get back up to that kind of speed and run by people? Because as you know, Ben, you don't run by people in the National Football League. Jalen Ramsey, it happened one time in the playoffs.
He got his helmet ripped off in the Super Bowl. Ain't nobody even called a thing.
Yeah, what happened the other 37 times when we lined up? You didn't go anywhere. You didn't get by me. So to me, that's the fun part of watching the combine and how it kind of evolves, and what some of these guys are going to be able to go out there and put up. But as you've seen it go so far, I mean, obviously the wide receivers have been an impressive group. Does that make you feel better if you're a Falcons fan about this draft, knowing, hey, so far offensive line guys have looked really good in terms of walking off the bus? The wide receivers, there's 4 or 5 guys that have put up really good numbers thus far. Makes you feel like you have some choice there at number 8, and it's not just, well, we'll see who falls. No, when it could be a situation, we talked with Kevin Knight earlier. When it gets to 8, you might actually have some choices, not just be like, that's the best guy, we're going to take him. It could be like, oh, there's 2 or 3 guys that we really like. Let's take the one we want. Shaping up to be a pretty deep draft, especially in some big areas.
Yeah, and Kevin, I mean, if you Terry Fontenot, that's what you want. You want to be able to say, okay, there's a guy we coveted. That's a guy that everybody wants at the position. But you go, hey, man, O-line is deep. Yeah. Quarterbacks are deep. Wide receivers are deep. Calvin Ridley is no longer going to be a Falcon next year, especially with what? I think he got, $12, $14 million up against the cap. There's no way they're going to bring him back for that much money. Kyle Pitts kind of worked out for us last year. We know that we got a chance to win the division if we can get one, Matty Ice upright, get us some offensive help. Well, I mean, you know what's helping these receivers? Justin Jefferson. I mean, Jamar Chase. These boys coming out ready. So this notion of, oh, you got to give them a year. So Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, and Trayvon Burks. These boys can come in ready to go right now because they're gonna feed him the rock. How do you get a guy ready to throw him the ball? What do you say on any given Sunday, Kevin? How much you pay that 300-pound blocker? Let him block. Put him out there and let's see. But if you Terry Fontenot, it makes your decision easier because let's face it, as long as Terry Fontenot is going to be the GM for the Falcons, he's going to be drafting a lot of offensive guys because that's what Atlanta's known for. But yeah, I think he's in a good situation now. If he gets a quarterback now, we both going to be like, what? Like, really? But O-line, the D-lineman, they about to be up next. I know that Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau, those guys about to be up next. But so far so good. Most of these position groups have been very, very impressive.
Yeah, Ben, I'm trying to think because I know that's been a point that everybody's talked about, and I'm trying to sit here and things like, is there a quarterback in this draft that if he was there, like I couldn't pass on? I don't think there is. Like knowing I have Matt Ryan, like I don't think there's a quarterback that I'm willing to go ahead and draft. Forgetting about all the other stuff that I need in this draft. Like I would even say if it's Malik Willis, if he's there at 8 and I'm the Falcons, I'm still probably not taking him because again, if you do that, why did you keep Matt Ryan around? Right. And I know you can say, well, he can look. No, you drafted a quarterback number 8. You decided to keep Matt Ryan over Julio Jones. Go get Matt Ryan some help and try to win this thing. Because windows are small, windows are tight in the National Football League in terms of chances to go out there and win. You decided to keep Matt Ryan. Why'd you keep him? Let him go play quarterback to kind of steal what you just said and give him the opportunity to go out there and get you into playoffs next season. We got more to come. Speaking of the Combine, Connor Riley, Dog Nation will join us. There's a lot of UGA guys walking around there in Indianapolis. We'll break it down with him next here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along here, 3 and Out on this Friday. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, glad you're making us a part of your day. Busy week in Indianapolis at the Combine. Busy weekend upcoming at the Combine as well. A lot of Georgia Bulldogs going to be on hand there. Ben Troop, 14 making their way through Indianapolis. Here to help us with all of that and who could be looking at some big paydays. Connor Riley, Dog Nation, joins us here on 3 and Out. Connor, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Doing great. Seems like Georgia's making news every day up there at the Combine with how many guys they have up there.
Yeah, I know, and I know George Pickens turned a lot of heads last night with his 40. I mean, how much of George Pickens and the NFL interest? I mean, there was going to be some anyway, but how much is that increasing day by day with every workout he does and everything he was able to do at the Combine, showing that he's healthy?
Yeah, I think he pretty clearly solidified himself at worst as I think a second-round pick there with how he tested athletically. I think for those who follow Georgia, 4.47 for Georgia is a great time. I think in comparison to some of the other first-round receivers, I think if that was, in that right at 4.4 range or even maybe 4.39, I think it really would have opened some doors for him to getting into the first round because there's not a ton of separation between, say, the fourth best receiver and, say, the seventh best receiver. And so I think for George, what yesterday really showed for him is even a year out from his knee injury, he's an incredible physical specimen. And I think anyone who watched him and watches his tape knows he's a much better football player than he necessarily is an athlete. And so when he's able to test the way he did yesterday, I think that's a very encouraging sign for his future. And I think even if he doesn't end up going in the first round because of the depth of wide receiver in this class, I think he's going to make an NFL team very, very happy when he is selected in April.
Connor, the one thing that stood out thus far with all these Georgia guys, every time they get interviewed, they keep on talking about how Georgia prepared them, for this moment. They treat us like it's an NFL, environment. I seen Devontae White saying those type of things. Just talk about how much they're embracing what Kirby Smart is selling at the university. Yes, they finally got over the hump with the national championship, but no one's making them get up there on these podiums saying these type things. They're not on Kirby Smart's list as far as like a pay list. Talk about just how those guys are up there really selling the program in Athens.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the culture that Kirby Smart has built where these guys know and understand that what they've done at Georgia for the last 3, 4, in some cases 5 years has really prepared them for this moment and prepared them for the NFL. They understand the rigors and the physicality that comes with not just, playing the SEC, but doing it at an NFL type level. And so when you have 14 guys going to the Combine, tying the record for the most ever sent by a single school, it clearly shows that you're doing something right in terms of developing NFL talent, or at least having sort of an NFL-like atmosphere around your program. And so I think, they understand where some other programs are more star-driven, they are more, top echelon guys. At Georgia, you've got to earn it. You've got to work in practice. Dirty hard work in the dark is a phrase this team has really adopted this past year, and I think that shows up. I mean, look at some of the guys that are going to be first-round picks potentially for Georgia. Obviously, the Kobe Dean, Trayvon Walker, those guys were 5 stars coming out of high school, but Jordan Davis was a 3-star that a lot of people in the recruiting industry thought was going to be an offensive tackle at the collegiate level. Devontae Wyatt went to community college for a year and was not a relatively highly thought of prospect coming out. And for those two to turn themselves into potential first-round draft picks, and I do think if Jordan and Devontae test well tomorrow, I think they're going to be first-round draft picks. I think it just speaks to the culture that has been built at Georgia, and I do think these guys recognize that the Combine is an opportunity to pay that back and show that, hey, we're here because of what we went through at the University of Georgia.
Connor Riley, Dog Nation, joining us here on 3 and Out. Connor, you mentioned Jordan Davis. I know he had his chance at the podium yesterday, saying he was up at 350, 360 there at the University of Georgia, going to try to play at 330 in the National Football League. Does that help his case that he can obviously be as athletic as he showed at 360 pounds and is planning on being at 330 in the National Football League?
Yeah, I think weight is always going to be a thing with Jordan Davis. It is always going to be something that he has to monitor. I think the 4 years that he was at Georgia, I think pretty clearly show that. And I think you can even look at this season, and he's talked about how he was not in the best shape in that first Alabama game. And I think you go back and watch the tape, it showed there. But the time off they had going into the playoff and then, into the national championship game, I think allowed Jordan to sort of reset himself and reestablish where he wanted to be weight-wise. And I think that showed up in Georgia winning against Michigan and winning against Alabama. Jordan, he's obviously an incredible talent. There is truly no one like him in this NFL draft. And on his run defense alone, at worst, it is going to make him a second-round pick. I think where he ends up going ultimately depends on, how well he tests athletically tomorrow. If he does what I think he is capable of doing, I think when you combine his sort of football character, which is through the roof, the fact that he was a captain for this team, for this program, really the face of the Georgia program this past year, I think speaks volumes about the type of person that an NFL team is getting. If he tests well and does well, and I know a lot of people are going to want to see what he does in the 40 at his size, but if he does well in like the short shuttle and 3-cone drills, he's going to end up being a first-round draft pick. And one of the interesting things with Jordan, just because he didn't rush the passer a whole lot at Georgia, in part because you have guys like Trayvon Walker and Jalen Carter who can do that on third down, doesn't necessarily mean that he can't outright do that together. And so I think that's a question that he's obviously going to have to answer in the NFL. But if he goes out and tests well tomorrow, with all that he did at the University of Georgia, with how he built himself up, with how he has developed his football character, with his maturity, I think he is going to ultimately end up being a first-round pick and a very good defensive lineman for a team.
Two guys that I think are very curious and very interesting guys representing these 14 guys that come out for Georgia. Zamir White and James Cook. I mean, when you think about Georgia and how what we've known Kirby Smart to be over the years is run game. Kind of got away from it a little bit, but kind of did it by committee. Talk about how much the both of those guys can definitely boost their stock here, in Indy, Connor, and especially with a guy like James Cook. In my opinion, I think he's the ultimate 3-down back who can catch it out the backfield.
Yeah, I think with James, I expect him to test well. The biggest thing with James, we can even say this with what we saw at his time at Georgia, he's got to go to a system where he's going to be utilized properly and maximized. I think you saw that this last year with Todd Monken, splitting him out, moving him around, giving him carries up the middle. If you look back and say his sophomore year when James Coley was the offensive coordinator, I mean, it was just so obvious when he was getting the ball on every play, and that didn't set up James to be a very successful player there. I would also say with Zamir and what he brings, I mean, obviously his football character is off the charts with sort of all that he has been through and sort of the toughness that he has shown during his time at Georgia. And if those knees come back clean, and we're led to believe that they have so far, I think he can have a good NFL career. And the thing with the running back position we've seen, you don't need to be a first-round pick to carve out a successful NFL career. You look at a guy like Mike Davis, who I believe was an undrafted free agent who's been in the league for a long time. Cordell Patterson has a lot of success this past year for the Atlanta Falcons after bouncing around for a while. So if you show some football traits, I think Zamir's ability to run between the tackles, be a hard-nosed runner, along with all else that he brings, a phenomenal special teams player. He might not go as high as certainly some people thought he would have coming into college, but I think Zamir White, and sort of touched on earlier, the football character part of it, I think he's going to be a successful NFL player. I don't know that he's going to be, a 1,500-yard rusher. I don't think he's going to be, say, Dalvin Cook. But he can carve out a real NFL career for himself because of all that he brings to the table. It is not just his ability there to carry the football.
Connor Riley, Dog Nation, joining us here on 3 and Out. Now, Connor, it's a Friday. I couldn't let you head off into the weekend without talking spring ball, which is coming up right around the corner for Georgia. What's the biggest storyline for you as Georgia opens practice here next week?
For me, I think the most thing that I am personally interested in is this wide receiver position. I think last year there was a lot of talent there, and because of injuries, we just never got to see it fully develop. And there were obviously questions. And by the end of the year, they got to a place where it was serviceable. That wide receiver room was really not up to par, especially compared to the talent on the rest of the team. There are some intriguing pieces back for this unit. But again, so many of them have dealt with injuries. It's hard to really know what we have. What is Dominic Blaylock going to look like now that he's truly fully healthy for the first time since December of 2019? Karius Jackson, I think, was pretty clearly hobbled by a knee injury last year. What does he give to this team? How do Ladd McConkey and Adonai Mitchell, probably real bright spots from last year's wide receiver group, build off what they did? What does Brian McClendon, the new wide receivers coach, bring to this wide receiver room? And then two guys that I'm really interested because I think they have the chance to really open up this wide receiver room, Arian Smith and CJ Smith. Arian Smith fractured his leg late last year in November. We'll see if he's able to go through drills and how active he's going to be this spring. We've seen with him, when he gets on the field, he makes plays. He just has not been able to stay on the field enough to do that. And I think he's able to do that this spring. It's going to be encouraging. CJ Smith is a freshman freshman signee out of the Orlando area. This guy has speed for days. Also really good size, measures in at 6'3", 180 pounds. And he recently shared that he clocked in at 22 miles an hour on GPS. That's incredibly fast for someone of that size. And so if C.J. Smith and Arian Smith are able to bring some speed to that wide receiver room, I think it's going to open up a lot of things for the talent that is in that room.
I mean, Connor, you talking about the wide receiver room. I mean, how intriguing could this quarterback room get? I mean, Stetson Bennett, I want to say sent shockwaves when he said he's going to come back, for his senior year. But that quarterback room has gotten very, very deep, very, very quickly with a guy like Stetson Bennett, who obviously is going to be the starter coming out of spring with what he just did in 2021. But, I mean, how much of a competition do you think it's going to be? And do you think that competition is going to find itself making it to the fall season as well?
Yeah, I don't think Kirby Smart's going to come out right and say Stetson Bennett is our starter like he did say JT Daniels last year, because I think some of the way I do expect Stetson to be the guy. But, once again, we enter a spring practice. Stetson Bennett won a national championship at Georgia, and everyone else is sort of wondering about the other quarterbacks in that room. I'm going to be really interested to see how the quarterback battle between Carson Beck, Brock Vandagriff, and I will throw Gunnar Stockton in there. I don't expect him personally to be much of a factor this spring, but Beck and Vandagriff, I think, have a real chance to not only compete for that backup job, but if they play well, potentially turn this into a bigger competition and really push Stetson and force the Georgia coaching staff to make a decision. These guys have both been in the program for a while. I think they bring different things to this team. I think that Carson is maybe a little bit more of your traditional quarterback, your traditional passer, whereas I think Brock's athleticism might really give him an edge there. But how those guys play out, how those guys look on G-Day, I think is, like you bring up, is going to be one of the more interesting storylines this spring, even though I think we all expect Stetson to still be the starter and be the starter on September 3rd when they open up against Oregon.
Connor Riley, Dog Nation, our guest here on 3 and Out. Connor, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Yep, thanks for having me on, guys.
Appreciate it. Connor Riley joining us here on 3 and Out. We've got a lot more to get to here on this Friday. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Friday. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, Matt Smith will join us coming up in the final hour of the program. We'll look at some spring storylines there from the SEC. We'll look at get Ben's thoughts there on the SEC coming up in the spring. Of course, the combine continuing on. You had 8 receivers go sub 4.4 yesterday at the combine, and we are just getting cranked up with workouts there in the National Football League as they get ready for the draft. But Ben, obviously we're getting ready for college basketball as well. Major conference tournaments coming up next week. They want to give a shout out to the Savannah State men's team. They are in the conference semis tonight. Had a big upset last night. They will play Morehouse tonight in the SEAC conference semifinals. And earlier today, the Savannah State Lady Tigers, they beat Albany State 73-59 to move on to the championship game. So they will play for a conference title tomorrow. So a couple of local teams with a chance to, one's going to play for the conference championship. Another one's going to play for a chance to play for the conference championship later tonight.
I mean, Kevin, I think sometimes, when we get to thinking about like, our area of the country, obviously it's football country, and we don't take that away. But I think that, you have to get credit when credit is due. You talk about a school, in Savannah State that, let's face it, man, since they went down from D1 to D2, people been saying, man, what type of atmosphere has kind of been on that campus, man. But shout out to both the men's and the women's, basketball teams that found a way to go out there, and get it done. And I will say this, Kevin. I mean, we ain't making a lot about it, but the women, they leading the way now. They've been doing it all year long. And Kevin, just like I know, what you want on the college campus is kind of like a high school atmosphere when it comes to sports. Because, the ladies are always saying, guys, y'all just get all the fanfare because y'all the guys. Y'all ain't doing what we doing. If you go to Savannah State this year, hey, man, they saying, man, y'all looking forward to y'all opponent, man. We're trying to keep pace with the lady, with the Lady Tigers, man. We're trying to make sure. But shout out to both Savannah State squads, man. Find a way to get it done because, Kevin, as we always talking about, exposure is the key. And listen, as long as you win it, you're going to keep going. And obviously, Savannah State, men and women finding themselves on the right side of this thing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And they continue on. I believe Georgia Southern still moving on in the Sun Belt tournament. But I think I saw Jared Binko say it was the first time both men's and women's teams had advanced in the same season in the conference tournament. So they're breaking a little history there as well at Georgia Southern. So a fun time of year, Ben, when you get to these conference tournaments, you just never know what in the world's going to happen. I mean, I think that's what makes this part of the year so much fun is that, you can play all year long and think and sometimes you do, and other times you just get hot at the right time, and that's the beauty of March, right?
I mean, listen, OPO in Savannah State, Jared Binko in Statesboro. I mean, Kevin, I ain't jinxing nothing. I don't even believe it. Listen, ain't no more curses. You see who I wear, right? Them piece up A-Town down Braves. They shut all that nonsense down. But Kevin, I think you said it right though. We get so caught up in, football season, we forget. Hey man, basketball season, hey, I'm trying to tell you, when the tournaments start, man, that's when the rubber meets the road. So listen, man, shout out to them Tigers, shout out to them Eagles, man, to find a way to get it done. Because the thing about it is, some of these schools have storied traditions, but we think it has to be on the out there on the football field on the door. Some of these schools got storied traditions on the basketball court as well. But shout out to both men's and women's, both in Statesboro and Savannah. Y'all better put some respect on the 912, man. They find a way to get it done. Shout out to both.
I was going to say they're representing the state of Georgia, because I know outside of Georgia State men's basketball, I don't think there's a basketball team with a winning record in the state of Georgia right now, seemingly at the collegiate level. Savannah State doing a good job there, getting the job done come conference tournament time as well. We've got so much to come here in the final hour of the program. Again, we'll keep looking at the combine. A lot to talk about when it comes to the SEC and those spring storylines. I know Georgia, we've talked earlier, Ben, they bring back a lot, and they will certainly be the hunted there in the East. Alabama, Texas A&M, a lot of things to figure out there as well. We'll talk with Matt Smith when we come back from southernpigskin.com. We'll get his thoughts on the Southeastern Conference as he sees it. Always good to talk with Matt. He'll probably know how many days and minutes there are until the first kickoff of the season and who it is. Like he just is all about that life when it comes down to it.
Listen, Matt, you know Kevin. He gonna say, "Listen, Kevin." He'll throw a stat out there to kind of mess you up with your next question. Like, well, Kevin, the last time Georgia, the last time Georgia had this many guys in the national championship was back in 2007. Right before the economy took a turn for the worse. Like, come on, Matt, man. Like, keep it strictly football. But I think now, though, Kevin, I'm not gonna ask, but I think Matt might be a daddy now. We might have to check him out.
Good to have you along here, 3 and Out on this Friday. Kevin Thomas and Ben Troop, glad you're making us a part of your day, streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com as well, and on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Glad you are here. A lot to get to here in the final hour of the program, but it's never too early to talk spring football here on the show, and who better to do that with than our next guest from SouthernPigskin.com. We'll always enjoy having him on the show. Matt Smith joins us here on 3 and Out. Matt, welcome. How are you, man?
Hey guys, doing well. Yeah, had Missouri get started last week, so it is officially spring football season here in SEC country.
And certainly, as you look around SEC country, and that will be expanding in the coming years as well. But as you look around SEC country, what's the big storyline league wide as these spring practices start popping up all over the place?
Yeah, I mean it's a cliche answer, but it's got to be some of the quarterback battles, especially the new faces going to intra-conference, intra-division schools that we're seeing. Whether it's Zach Calzada making the move from Texas A&M to Auburn, is he going to be the guy there after a crazy offseason so far for the Tigers? You know, what's going on at LSU? Can Miles Brennan stay healthy for the first time really in his career? We got Max Johnson going to Texas A&M. Is he going to be the guy? Is James King going to be back healthy after missing most of last season? So just crazy. Jackson Dart coming into Ole Miss. Can he unseat Luke Altmaier, who was the backup last year to Matt Corral? Just crazy quarterback battles going on. Probably even more so than most years. So certainly, as most people will, the thing I'll be keeping an eye on most over the next 6 weeks or so.
Man, when you think about how intriguing this quarterback room is going to be for Georgia, obviously Stetson Bennett is going to be the guy coming off a national championship. But at a certain point, you're going to have to start letting some of these guys you recruited get a chance to go out there and play, or people are going to be thinking, hey, man, coming to Georgia, unless you one of the best story, or unless you one of the biggest stories coming out of Southeast Georgia, you don't even get a chance to play quarterback these days.
It's crazy. You know, I said all last year, like, it's time. Do we do something else there? Can you really win a national championship with this guy? And, you know, for the first, maybe 2.5 quarters of the national title game, it looked like Georgia probably just couldn't do it. And then give Stetson Bennett credit, of course. He was outstanding in that final stretch there to get Georgia over the hump, and got his some 5-digit dollar figure bourbon to drink, which he more than well deserved. After that performance. But yeah, I mean, he's got to be the guy, at least initially. Could I see a scenario where something goes awry and with the defense maybe taking a bit of a step back from last year's dominant unit, they feel like maybe they need to make a move because they need to win games in a different style than they were able to do for pretty much all of 2021. So just fascinating how it affects recruiting. I don't think so. Obviously, there's one certain quarterback we know we're going to be keeping our eye on here that should be making a decision over the summer sometime with a pretty famous last name. So we'll see if that plays a factor in the situation there, but I don't think so. But it is just funny going into the season for the Bulldogs with a guy who just won the national title, wondering, will he be the guy again for all 12, 13, 14, 15 games again? But such is life when you're Stetson Bennett. He's answered every question that's been fired at him over the last couple of years about whether he was worthy of that honor to play for such a talented team in the SEC.
Yeah, and Matt, obviously we're kind of close to it here in the state, but interested to see your thoughts on how the narrative outside of Georgia has changed on the Bulldogs, because for so many years it was 1980, all the resources, all the money, all the backing, all the fan support, 1980. Now that's kind of gone away. Is the narrative now Alabama light? Is that what we're talking about with Georgia now? Or how do you think the narrative has changed around this Georgia team from obviously outside the state of Georgia?
I think it's Alabama East. I think it was Alabama light prior to last year, but no more when they went out and beat them on the biggest of stages. So, I think they're pretty much equivalent programs. I think in terms of a reset, it's probably a bit more to replace at Georgia than what Alabama has. That defense should be absolutely phenomenal. So, I'd probably give the edge to Alabama on the overall roster next year. But for the coming, 4 and 5 years, I think with what they have in the pipeline, it's probably just going to go, shoots and ladders about who's got the slight advantage in one given year, just based on who turns pro, who might have done a little better in recruiting, which guys panned out, coaching turnover, and all those little factors. But to me, they're pretty much equivalent programs, at least. I mean, Nick's the best to ever do it and probably is going to be for the rest of our lifetime. But in terms of the current states of the program, I think they're on par. We saw that last year, splitting 2 meetings. We'll see one in 2022 here. So, no, Alabama light, those days are over, I think.
And man, I mean, the thing about it is with teams like Georgia and Alabama, they're just reloading. When you think about teams that are trying to keep pace, I mean, you think about Florida, you think about LSU, you think about the Auburns, you think about Tennessee. Which team this spring is going to have a good showing? And obviously, you don't really know what to really make of the spring because everything is all scripted. But what teams, what second tier teams or the second or third teams in each conference really got to show that, hey, man, coming out of the spring, we got to at least show some promise that we can at least kind of keep pace with these two guys at the top.
Yeah, roster-wise, Ben, I probably think A&M is the only one who has the roster to even compete with those two next year. In terms of program health going forward, I think LSU is in a much better spot with a competent head coach who at least takes care of business against teams where he has talent advantage. He did that for pretty much the last 5 years at Notre Dame, where if they played a team that they were better than, they beat them. There was no stupid losses, no head-scratching performances like we saw way too much of from LSU. So I think, by 2023, 2024, they're in a good spot. I think the same with Florida. If you're talking to people who know Nick Saban and his coaching tree well, they seem to think that Billy Napier is the most like Saban personality-wise. I think you're seeing that with some of the stuff he's implemented, some of the new titles he's had. But that's not a one-year fix. That's not a Band-Aid. There were a lot of issues both on and off the field, I think, with that program last year. So 2 or 3 years from now, I think Florida LSU can elevate themselves. But for 2022, I think A&M's really the only one, and that's relying a lot on this high-priced, if you will, freshman class that they got coming in. But even for them, I'm pointing to 2023 as the year where I give A&M actually a pretty good shot to finally unseat Alabama in the SEC West. I don't think this is the year just because of still some uncertainty at quarterback and so many freshmen that they're going to need to step in. I think that's a tough ask against what should be a loaded Alabama team. So roster-wise, I think A&M is probably the only one I even put in the same breath but the experience gap, I think will hold the Aggies back for at least one more year, trying to capture that elusive SEC West title for the first time.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, joining us here on 3 and Out. Matt, you mentioned health of the program, so that leads my mind in one direction, and that's Auburn. How do they bounce back from all that took place in the offseason? I know you got Zach Calzada coming in. You have a really good quarterback from our area, and Holden Gerder going in as a highly thought of quarterback. But obviously there are folks inside the program that don't like Brian Harsin. How do you keep the program moving forward over all that's happened there at Auburn?
Yeah, they just haven't had the ability to, tell those prominent boosters to just shut up and we'll win and everything will be fine and dandy. Alabama was able to do that, give both Saban and Mal more credit at the time. But, we're not going to do some of this stuff. You guys just sit back. We'll get the players. It doesn't matter who gets the credit. We're going to win at the end of the day. I don't think we've seen those dynamics really work itself out at Auburn, which, they've been able to flash at times, of course, but it turns quickly. It turns 180 degrees very quickly at that place, more so than any other in the conference. So I think looking at what Auburn has on paper, looking at their schedule, it's hard for me to see them going, I think 7-5 would actually be a really good job for this team with what they got coming back and the road they have to face in the SEC West. So to me, this probably ends in December again. They're going to have to pay a lot of money again. I know they've had to, bridge over some gaps over the past month with Harsin in the school, but it's a mess. I think the record's going to be bad. I'd probably pick them 7th in the West at this point. And I expect the coaching search. I expected it a month ago, given the way things were playing out, but they settled it, patched up some things for time at least, but it's going to erode once again. And I think we'll be looking at another wild and crazy Auburn coaching search come December, another huge buyout on the books after what they paid to Gus Malzahn about a year and a half ago. But that's par for the course, as crazy as it is at a place like Auburn.
Matt, when Tennessee was able to go out there and finally put Hendon Hooker in as a starter, you saw what he did for that offense. You look at a guy like Stetson Bennett, who's coming back as the national championship winner. You don't know what Florida is going to do at the quarterback position. Does South Carolina has the best quarterback in the SEC East right now, even though Spencer Rattler hasn't taken a snap yet?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was, like most people, I was pretty high on Rattler coming into 2021. I thought he played in a bit of a rage at time in 2020. That was kind of my concern with both him and Matt Corral, was that they were kind of two overly emotional players. And I think while Corral took a lot of strides in that way in 2021 and should make himself quite a bit of money here about 2 months from now, Rattler kind of backslid. I think he got flustered too much. He knew there was a lot of buzz about Caleb Williams. Probably didn't handle that situation very well. But it's time for a fresh start. The talent is there. Certainly a mature player now going into his fourth year in college. I expect a lot of strides in that sense. Again, the talent is there. The arm strength is there. This guy can play on Sundays at some point. But if he's coached well, I think that can happen. But I think the emotional side of things is what concerned me last year. I think what he needs to work on most. Not going to have a ton of talent at South Carolina, but is going to be on a lot of big stages and a chance to elevate. And I don't think the SEC East quarterback crop, as you were saying, Ben, is super impressive. Hendon Hooker's pretty good. Obviously, you got a national championship winner in Stetson Bennett. We don't know what Missouri's going to do. We don't know what Florida's going to do. Vanderbilt's Vanderbilt. So some chances to really have a significant gap talent-wise at quarterback at least. Does that translate into wins for South Carolina? I don't know. But I think that's a step for Rattler, is kind of look to what Matt Corral did last year. Put a, very up and down, some really bad performances behind him. Be a more consistent player. Not have those wild swings and just be more stable. And I think that can get him to where he wants to be, both personally and then becoming professionally, potentially as soon as next spring.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, joining us. Matt, Ben mentioned Tennessee there for a moment. Are you buying the gains they made late in the year? Is that momentum that you think feeds into 2022? And might Tennessee be making a run as that number 2 behind Georgia in the East?
Yeah, I think they're in that group. It's kind of hard for me to really separate Tennessee, Kentucky, and Florida. I think they're 2 to 4 in some order. I think Tennessee probably has a schedule advantage there, at least amongst those three. They'll get both Kentucky and Florida and Knoxville. But yeah, Hendon Hooker was really impressive. Got his top target back in Cedric Tillman. Maybe a bit like the situation Ole Miss was in a year ago, where if that defense can just take a little bit of stride, or a few strides, which Ole Miss did last year very well. That was a nice job by DJ Durkin, and earned himself a whole lot of money at A&M getting that job. If the defense can take a couple significant steps forward, that's a program you could see going from 7-6, I think they were, to maybe 9-3, 10-2, and even contending for a New Year's Six Bowl, kind of like Ole Miss did last year. So that's a lot to ask for a program that's kind of been stuck spinning their wheels for 10 or 15 years now, and I'm sure Ben's enjoyed every bit of that. But I think there are some good signs there. I think Heupel knows what he's doing, and for the first time since probably 2004-ish, Tennessee, I think, is in a pretty good spot. Long way to go to catch Georgia. That's 2 or 3 years away, but I think second place in the East is definitely something that can be on the table for the Vols in 2022.
And man, I know we some months away, but how intriguing do you think SEC Media Days is going to be when you talk about? Obviously Kirby Smart coming in with the national championship. Nick Saban saying, "Listen, they won the national, but we still won the SEC." And then you talk about guys like Brian Kelly. You talk about guys like Billy Napier. You talk about guys like Spencer Rattler. It's going to be star-studded, both coaches and players. And I think for the SEC and guys like Greg Sankey, he would want nothing more than to have all eyes on Atlanta come June or come July.
Always is. Yeah, I think Brian Kelly's always pretty good with the media. He's kind of got that politician-ish charm, so he's always had a pretty good face for the media and stuff. Handles that well. Billy Napier is very interesting because, again, I think we're going to see just kind of his mannerisms, some of his phrasing, that he's going to be a lot like Saban. Not that some of Saban's other proteges, whether it be Kirby, whether it be Jimbo, Jeremy Pruitt, weren't. But again, I think we're just going to see so much of Saban getting our first real chance at Billy Napier as a Power 5 head coach in that setting. So probably for me, that'll be the most interesting, just to see, oh yeah, I see that. I see that Saban in him. So yeah, always a star-studded event. Brian Harsin, of course, having to answer questions about what he went through over the past couple months. So always will be a crazy setting, and probably the first real SEC Media Days. Obviously had it last year, but not quite the same, not having it all in 2020. But I feel like the old days pre-pandemic. So yeah, it's 4 months away, but time flies, and they'll be gathering in Atlanta. It'll be the brink of the season before long. Can't wait.
I know they'll downplay it, I'm sure, but do you think there'll be a kind of a growing sense of urgency, especially from the Tennessees, from the Kentuckys, from the the Sam Pittmans in Arkansas and some others, knowing that Oklahoma and Texas are right on the horizon, and that's just not that they're scared of, but it's like there's just 2 more teams you may potentially have to go up against, and not knowing fully what the landscape of the SEC might look like once they get there.
Sure, and some of that is depending on what happens with the playoff here, whether we have probably a year or two gap, I would say, where we'll still have 4 teams and you're going to have Texas and Oklahoma in the league. And for a team like whoever, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Tennessee, to think they can make a run to a 14 playoff with that in a 16-team conference, well, yeah, that's a lot to ask. But going forward, where there's probably more access, I don't think there's any reason to panic here because the SEC is going to own pretty much all the at-large spots, you would think, when you get to a 16-team conference with that. We'll see how the divisions and schedule and all that sorts out over the next year or two. But, yeah, I wouldn't say it's time to panic. I mean, I would panic more if I'm Texas than if I'm Tennessee or Arkansas. They see this every year. They know what's coming. Texas doesn't know what's coming. They'll get a Kansas thrown in there or a Texas Tech thrown in there for kind of a down week. You don't get that in the SEC West. You got to play Alabama, and then you got to turn around and host LSU, and then you're going up to Arkansas, and it's 40 degrees and rainy in Fayetteville. That's life in the SEC West, and I don't know if those programs are ready for that. So, in terms of who should be scared right now, I think much more so Texas and Oklahoma should be as opposed to Arkansas and Ole Miss. They know what they're getting into. They know this life. It's tough, but they do it every year, and they make it work as best they can given the resources they have.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, our guest here on 3 and Out. Matt, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll talk soon. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, boy. Have a good weekend.
Appreciate it. Matt Smith, always great talking to him. SouthernPigskin.com is the SEC. Storylines abound as, again, Missouri back at it and teams just popping up all over the place with spring practice. We'll break down some of our big storylines when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Friday. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, glad you're making us a part of your day. Again, just got done talking with Matt Smith, a lot of SEC storylines as we head into the spring. And Ben Troop, what's kind of your big storyline to watch around the SEC here?
Kevin, I mean, I really, really want to see, I think you said it. With everything that happened with Auburn, right? It was, I ain't never seen nothing like this. Like, I've never seen a fan base and maybe a school seemingly like turn on the coach, but then realize, well, dude, like, we're gonna have to do an investigation. And when the investigation proved that he ain't done nothing, how do we kind of do damage control? Because Kevin, isn't Auburn that curious case? Like every year we think they're not gonna do good, they do good. Every year, preseason top 10, they don't do good, but I don't think they've ever had an off season like this. It was like obviously the Gus Malzahn moving on from him, that was a big deal. But I ain't never seen nothing like this situation with Coach Harsin. I mean, you get rid of both coordinators. Obviously, Bo Nix moves on. I just think it's crazy. You got the coordinator turnover. You got guys like Bo Nix leaving, but the Harsin situation, it was weird because being in the media, we really have to wait. Like, yeah, we report on it, but we still got to kind of wait to say, I don't want to just be picking a side like I know, and then when it come out, okay, he's coming back. It's like, what if you are what if you are the president, you are the AD saying, well, dude, you had me in my office talking about we're going to have to do another buyout. Now you saying, welcome back. I just think that, Kevin, if we can get past the stuff that has nothing to do with football to actual football activities, I'm going to be interested to see how those Auburn Tigers kind of end up during the spring.
Yeah, I think they're an interesting story because you feel like on some level they should be better than what they've been, but at the same time, it's been dysfunction over there for quite some time as well. To me, I'm looking at two places in the East, Tennessee and Florida. I think Georgia is embraced. I mean, that's what Kirby Smart has done since he's been there. He's like, we want to be Alabama East, basically, and that's what he has done now with the championship. But I look at Florida and Tennessee. I mean, as you well know, Ben, I mean, if this was 1990s football, it was Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida every single year up in there. In Tennessee and Florida, you go back and look here. But to me, Napier is stepping into a situation where you can win, right? You've had a number of different coaches. Muschamp had a season where they jumped up there and won 11 games. You've had different coaches that didn't ultimately work out that still had some success. Dan Mullen had some success. It ultimately did not work out. So can Billy Napier do that and get Florida in contention for the East and kind of put them back on that map? I think he can. To me, Tennessee's interesting because you got a lot of just bad things that have happened to Tennessee since Philip Fulmer was the head coach. And you say, well, what do you mean? Well, Georgia has pretty much owned you in the series. I think Tennessee's only won, 2 or 3 of the last 15 against Georgia. You go, man, that's pretty bad. Well, take a look at their record against the Gators. It's almost as bad against Florida. I think they've only won maybe twice in 15 years against the Florida Gators. So to me, if you're looking at Josh Heupel, yeah, it's all fun and it was exciting. It's up tempo, but man, you have been awful against your big contention. Now, is anybody going to cry about, hey, they haven't beat Alabama in like 14 years.
Yeah, it's been a while. And that's their crossover.
That's at least understandable that your crossover is Alabama. They've been winning national championships. I get it. But those 3 series, you haven't really been competitive in, right? I mean, you're talking about a combined maybe 45 games against Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, and you've maybe won 5 of those. So 5-40 against your big 3 rivals, that's something you got to slowly turn around. Like, I appreciate it when you're slapping around Vanderbilt and Missouri and you're getting some wins like that. But I think for Tennessee, for me to truly buy into them, how much better can they get under Josh Heupel to where they can beat Florida? They feel like going and playing Georgia, they can win. They can be the aggressor in that game. They could actually have the talent to stay on the field with Alabama and be competitive. So to me, those are the things that I look at Tennessee and people say, man, Josh Heupel really got it turned around. And he did. Mm-hmm. But also, who were you beating?
Yeah.
You're beating some teams that traditionally Tennessee has been better than. You've beat some teams at the bottom of the league. And I really feel like you need to see progress year 2 and how you compete against Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Doesn't mean you're going to beat them, but I think how do you compete against Georgia? If you could keep it close, maybe you're closing that gap. if you could compete with Alabama. I think you go back and look at the Tennessee Alabama tapes the last few years. The last time it was within a touchdown, I think Mount Cody was playing. I'm being serious. Was playing for Alabama.
It's been a long time.
So it's been a minute since you've even been able to say, hey, we deserve to be on the same field. So to me, I'm watching Tennessee. Are we overbuying that flurry of finish versus maybe where they actually are as a program?
Kevin, I will say this. Coach Heupel shows you that when you got a guy that wants to be at Tennessee or wants to be at a program that wants to take on the recent history or lack thereof, it shows. Now, Hendon Hooker is going to have a lot to do with it. Obviously, Hendon Hooker was decided to come there well before Heupel even became the head coach, but you see that his ability translated to the new system that they brought in from UCF with Coach Heupel. But now, Kevin, that's 7-5. It looks better than what it is. Like you said, who did you lose to? You losing to familiar foe. You losing to Georgia, losing to Florida. It's not even close with Alabama, but you still end up with 7 wins. So that 7th win is deceiving. Now, you had a year to kind of say, okay, this is what Heupel wants to run. Now, are they running as many plays as they thought? Yes and no. Yes, they do when they win, but when they lose, it's much to do about nothing. Like the game is really over. You're still trying to get these plays in. So kind of similar to Coach, like a Mike Leach East. You want to run a bunch of plays, even though it ain't the air raid, and how is it going to go? But I think you make a good point when you even talk about Florida. Like the thing about Billy Napier is coming in with a lot of fanfare. You saw what he did in Louisiana. I mean, you see he getting a new coach. He get a new coach like every single day. But does what he do? But is what he's doing, Kevin? Does it translate to wins? Because you know, just like I know, Kevin, there are no mulligans anymore. There are no, hey man, they're gonna give him a year. There are no given years anymore. And you can blame that on the Coach Heupel. He comes in first year, 7 wins, right? Sam Pittman, first year in the SEC, 7-8 wins in an all SEC schedule. So I think a guy like Billy Napier is, unfortunately, they gave you all $7.5 million. That's what you got for your staff. You talk about being able to say, hey man, unfortunately, the best team in the country is in our division, not named Alabama, being those boys in Athens. So I do think the pressure, and then you got to deal with the fact that, hey man, Spencer Rattler's in South Carolina, and y'all lost to them last year. Missouri, I don't know who their quarterback is. Y'all lost it even though he had nothing to do with it. So I do think all eyes going to be on Florida. Billy Napier, that quarterback position, because while you got Anthony Richardson, while you still got Emory Jones, who is it going to be? Is it going to be the transfer from Ohio State? And I think it's going to, that's what makes it intriguing, Kevin. Excuse me, when you think about Tennessee, all right, are they quote, are they back? Now, and when we say back, Kevin, I'm not talking about the Tennessee men you grew up watching. We're talking about, are they a consistent 7, 8, maybe 9 win team? And the days of they ain't worrying about beating Vanderbilt, because as of recent, Vanderbilt was beating Tennessee. I mean, and then if you talk about Florida, is, hey man, are you the consistent number 2 right now in the East? Because it's crowded. Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina. I mean, who knows? It was up for grabs. So I think that, but I do think that the pressure is supposed to be there. Because the pressure's coming out of Athens. Because now, Kevin, we talking about a storyline. Finally got over the hump in Athens. I mean, exercised a lot of demons. Every Georgia player, Jeff Owens say all 10,000 former players say, "Hey man, congratulations on the national championship." But now, Kevin, can you maintain that status quo? Because just like I know, if Georgia ain't in the college football playoff in 2022, those same bluebirds or those same they coming back. And that's how it is, Kevin. It's like sustainability is the hardest one. Can Georgia sustain? Which I think they can, but that's easier said than done.
Yeah, and from that standpoint, Nick Saban ruined that for everybody, where he's like, you just come out and win and play for that, and like making it look like that's what it's supposed to go each and every year. We got more to come. Combine going on right in through the weekend. We'll break some of that down. We are looking at maybe at certain position, very deep draft. Where can you get the most value when you say jump on this guy, but maybe you can wait till the second round and still get very good value if you're a team like Atlanta at number 8. We'll hit that when we return. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along here, 3 and Out on this Friday. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, glad you're with us. Combine going on. And if you're an Atlanta Falcons fan picking at 8, Ben, you have to feel good. A lot of options for players there at number 8. How deep do you feel this draft is, and what position groups do you think might be the deepest that we see in this draft? So if you're Atlanta, you could say, man, they really needed to get this, but you could still address it with a quality player in round number 2.
I mean, for what I've seen, Kevin, the deepest position right now might be the receivers. And I know that's easy to say. I mean, these boys throwing up 4 2s and 4 3s like it's nothing. I mean, you had, 8, 9 guys run sub 4 3s, 4 4s, and that's something that's hard to come by. I mean, with George Pickens, guy that missed a full year, 6'3", 6'4", 200 pounds, ran a 4.40. I mean, we talk about Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson ran a 4.3. Freaking Chris Olave ran a 4.2. Those 2 of your 4 starting receivers last year. Was you asked why C.J. Stroud put up the numbers he put? Well, 2 of his receivers are sub 4.3, and he got 2 that's still there, with one of them putting up a full season in 1 bowl game. But I do think it's wide receivers. But I do got to get my homer on for a second. I've gone the whole show. I did my best to stay away from it, but the tight end position is deeper than you think. And the reason why I say that is, Kevin, I mean, we know about the Jalen, we know about Wademeyer, up there, Texas A&M. We know about Isaiah Likely at Coastal Carolina, or Trey McBride. I give you 2 guys that stood out to me, though. University of Virginia, Jelani Woods, 6'7", 259 pounds. He ran a 4.61, 24 on the bench, Kevin, which means he was the strongest tight end. And the man ran a 4.61. That's 259 pounds. That's LeBron running at tight end, just an inch shorter and maybe like a couple of pounds heavier. I'm going to do my best. And listen, if you are a Maryland Terps fan, just please forgive me. I mean, Chigoziem Okonkwo. I'm doing my best. Thank God. Vince Young, you couldn't pronounce it either. But anyway, I mean, listen. 4.5 2 40, Kevin. And I think what happens is, Kevin, when you think about the NFL for a second, right? We get enamored by these receivers, right? The Jamar Chases, the Justin Jeffersons, the Odell Beckham Jr., the Tyreek Hills, but these are rare. When I think about the tight end position, think about what it does for your offense. Look at what it does for Atlanta offense last year, right? Look at what it does for Kansas City's. Or look at what it does, look at what it does for San Francisco. Look at what it does for Baltimore. Mark Andrews, tight end out of Oklahoma, was first-team All-Pro last year. All I'm saying is you need an inline blocker that can make money in between the hashes and down the seams. I think these guys are built to do it because, Kevin, what happens is you don't got to deal with Jalen Ramsey. You don't got to deal with, Stephon Gilmore. You're dealing with safeties that's giving up 50, sometimes 60 pounds. And, and you get a guy like Jelani Woods, 24 inches on the bench press. That's long arms. That means he's probably doing 30 reps to guys with regular size arms. So I think that while the wide receiver position is the deepest, and obviously the O-line, the D-line are freakish, I think when you look at where the NFL is going, you give a quarterback a tight end that can be consistent. That's going to help out any team, because I think a lot of teams are saying, dude, we can run our passing game through these guys. These guys are top 5, top 10 in the league and receiving. I mean, is there a better tight end in the league than Travis Kelce? No. Is there a better all-around tight end than George Kittle? No. Is there a better athlete than Darren Waller? No. So these guys, I think, 6'7", Kevin, 6'7", 259. If you can't find a way to get it on the field, you don't need to be an offensive coordinator. You shouldn't coach football. I don't care who. And that's a 4.61. That's a lot of man and a lot of speed coming at you. I'm making business decisions all day long if I'm playing safety dealing with these dudes.
I was going to say, Ben, that it seems to me that in the last really handful of years with the athletes, maybe 2 decades, I would say, you look at the tight end position, it's where I think the NFL brass have kind of figured out we can create mismatches. That's the easiest spot to create mismatches, especially with the guys that are big and athletic as they are. Because if you're big enough to hang with me, you're not fast enough. And if you're fast enough to hang with me, you're not big enough to take that beating all game. So I think that has been the position that is kind of been, the revelation, because it's where you can most easy, I think, find a mismatch, because guys will say, well, just get a 6'4" wide receiver. Okay. I mean, most corners that are, 5 stars coming out of college are like 6'1", 6'2". Like, I think that gap has kind of closed a little bit in terms of just get a guy that's 6 inches taller and throw it up to him. I think that gap's kind of closed a little bit. Running back, I mean, unless you're Derrick Henry, my God, that's one guy in the history of guys. It's hard to create that mismatch there at the running back positions. But to me, the tight end, where it's like, if you're big enough, you're not fast enough, and if you're fast enough, you're not big enough to stay with me all game.
Well, I mean, I think Kevin too. But think about this too, though, Kevin. The goal is to make the quarterback position an easier transition because of the guys around him, right? Well, who's going to stand out the quickest? The guy that's closest to you. Well, the tight end is right there. He's got his hand, got his hand on the line, and you're talking about an intermediate route runner. He's going to be running 5-yard stick routes. He's going to be running 10-yard in cuts. He's going to be running corner routes. I mean, he's going to be running flat routes. So he's going to be real quick decision making. And he's 6'5", 6'6". I mean, and Jelani Woods, 6'7". So I think, and the thing is, too, the greatest tight end in NFL history is Gronk. Gronk is not the most talented tight end I've ever seen. Gronk is not the most athletic tight end I've ever seen. But he's 6'6", 270 or 265, and don't nobody want to deal with him because Kevin, the thing is, when he get the balls in his hand, people can't tackle him. Not that they don't want to tackle him. They're like, dude, look at him. And he's a clumsy athlete, but he's also the greatest. And I think that, Kevin, when you talk about pairings, I'm going to say this. I never saw Darren Waller becoming that. Coming out of Georgia Tech, I knew he had athletic ability. I didn't see him becoming that, but I think that's what happens. You get him in the right system, with the right quarterback, and you're going to highlight what he does. I'm sorry, man. Darren Waller is a top 3, top 4 tight end in the league, and that's any year ever since he's been with the Raiders. So I do think, Kevin, now the tight end position, never ever going to be seen as, quote, the glamour position, but a lot more fanfare than it has in the past.
Well, just last year, the Falcons took one higher than anyone had ever taken one in a draft ever. And he had the best rookie year ever for a tight end in terms of yards. Now, I mean, obviously Falcons fans would love for him to get in the end zone a little bit more at the end of the day, but that would be, I think you're going to see some more of that in the coming years at the tight end position. All right, Ben, if you're the Falcons there at 8, what are you looking to do right now? Because we've talked to a number of folks. A number of guys could fall to you. I know it'd be tempting to take maybe a wide receiver, but could you get that in the second round? Given what could fall to you, and there's any kind of scenario there at 8, what are you looking to do if you're Atlanta? Where can you get your best value at number 8 in terms of, all right, the position is deep, but this guy, if he's here, we can't pass him up.
If for some unforeseen reason, Kayvon Thibodeau, the big time pass rusher at Oregon, if he drops, you got to get him because you need a pass rusher bad. But I will say this about the Falcons. I mean, Kevin, you're not going to get a receiver that high. Unfortunately, you're not going to get one of those guys that high. But I think that for Atlanta, man, you got to think cornerback. Because the thing about it is AJ Terrell really panned out. He's going into year 3. If you can get you a Sauce Walk, a Sauce Gardner, if you can get you a Derek Stingley, I think you pull the trigger. Because I think what happens is, Kevin, I think they're going to try to address the wide receiver position either later in the draft or in free agency. But if you can get you 2 lockdown corners, which is going to make life a little bit better for those D linemen, I think you get him because I think, Kevin, with a team like Atlanta that needs so much, I mean, you're not going to get a running back. You're not going to get a receiver that high unless a pass rusher drops to you, you're going to get him. I mean, you will always take an offensive lineman, but you're just 2 years removed from getting 2 offensive linemen in the first round, so you're not going to go there either. So I think they go cornerback, maybe the safety out of Notre Dame. If he drops that far, you get him. But defensive end, cornerback, safety, and maybe if you got an offensive lineman that you thought was going to be a top 3 pick that drops to you, maybe you take a chance on him.
Falcons with a lot of options. I think you're seeing that more and more as we talk about these mock drafts and how this draft opens up. I mean, Atlanta's in a good spot. I guess you could say, well, they need everything, but I think no matter what position you go at 8, you're going to get one of the top guys there at number 8 and still get, even if you get number 2 in some cases, maybe a guy that might have been top 4, top 3 in some other years coming out. We got more to come here on this Fridays. We're trying to get you to the weekend. Stay with us here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. As we bring you home here on this Friday afternoon, glad you're making us a part of your day. Kevin Thomas, Ben Troop, as we head into the weekend. Of course, next week, major college conference tournaments going to be taking place as well. We'll hopefully see if Major League Baseball decides they want to talk some more and get closer to a deal as well. We've got Hawks and Wizards coming up tonight for you in our Brunswick and Waycross market, up in our Savannah market as well. We've got Georgia and Georgia Tech on the baseball diamond. So two top 15 type programs going at it. I think they're playing 2 this weekend. So we'll have that for you in our Savannah market here this evening, plus the NFL Combine going on all weekend long, Ben. So a full weekend, even with no baseball on the calendar out there in the sports landscape.
Kevin, it's happening. Kevin, remember you said what is going to replace this airtime? We talking about MLB, and mind you, it's early. But Kevin, you said it. Kevin was like, "Listen, I don't like predicting the future and being right." MLB, get it together, man. Because listen, you never miss something until it's gone. Well, guess what? You might not be missed as much as you thought because these TV networks, they're going to fill that slot. Don't think that there's not going to be anything filled. We might get sick of what we're looking at, but they're going to fill that slot.
But a lot to get to. A big weekend for the Hawks. They start a road trip at the Wizards. They are in 10th, are the Hawks right now, Ben. So as they come down the stretch here in March and April, trying to get up out of 10, hopefully get to 8 and not be in as bad a playoff situation.
I mean, I hope the Hawks, understand, Kevin. I think it's going to come back to, like, obviously last year they kind of peaked a little bit, making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. They're going to have to be scrappy on defense. Trae Young is going to give you all you can handle on the offensive side of the ball, but they still end up losing by, 5 or 6 points. Be more active on the defensive end. Try to scratch and claw because, Kevin, they're going to be right in the thick of things to be, get one of those last playoff spots. But once again, they're going to need every single game to come down to the wire to be a potential back-to-back playoff team.
Yeah, you hate that it makes you sweat it out like that, but they could possibly do that coming up down the stretch of the season. Again, we'll see how the combine turns out. We've kind of seen the quarterbacks do some of their things. It'll be interesting to see who else kind of turns some heads. I always like seeing the big men once they get out there and run. And like you said, people don't appreciate 6'7", 250 running 4.6, but I don't think people appreciate like 6'4", 320 running like 5 flat. You're like 5 flat. That's like, do you appreciate how much weight is getting picked up and put down running down that 40-yard track?
Y'all better be lucky that this happens at the combine, because if you got a 300-something pound man running full speed at you, you better not owe him no money. Because I'm telling you, he's coming for his bread. But I'm happy for everybody involved, Kevin. It's been as good as advertised. And as we know, save the best for last. Deion Sanders will be making an appearance this weekend because the cornerbacks and DBs are in the building.
And just get Prime out there and run a 40 again and see how it goes. I think BJ Bennett might pass.
Oh, yeah, BJ going to be watching it, but they go Prime. I know he's on my TV. I can see him.
There you go. We've got so much more to get to next week. Appreciate Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, Connor Riley, Dog Nation, joining us here on the program. Anthony Trace, Pro Football Focus, and Kevin Knight of the Falcoholic. Certainly a lot of options there for Atlanta coming out of this combine. Appreciate all those gentlemen joining us here on the show. We'll see you Monday. If you missed any portion of the show, ESPNCoastal.com. Go to our YouTube page as well. We'll see you Monday, 3 and out.